Church Ministry. What is your mission, vision, and problem, please? Talk, please.
I have a confession. I am
Yes,
a Christian, but I'm
A music addict.
Hey! Move your
I was very fortunate to grow up in a household where music was played constantly, especially on weekends, and it wasn't just Angolan artists. I still remember finding Eminem and Tyler the Creator through MTV, or when my mom introduced me to Busta Rhymes, Sara Tavares and Alcione, my dad with Michael Jackson. I was never missing out on new sounds. There's also the fact of English not being my mother tongue, which placed a big barrier for me as a kid with English lyrics, which inadvertently led me to develop an obsession with instrumentals over lyrics. In my teens, I found so many genres I don't think I would still be listening to attentively today, like house, EDM, dubstep, drum and bass, or vaporwave, and its many subgenres at the start of my chronically online phase, as well as experimental, which is where I sit as my current favorite style of music making. I've always been obsessed, and in many ways, video games amplified that along the way. Even with all this passion, I used to treat game soundtracks the same way I used to treat film scores. It's in the background for a reason, complementing a scene so it doesn't feel empty. And cinematic games with their homogeneous soundscapes further exacerbate this feeling, which cemented my opinion as the years went by. Until I played two specific games that changed my whole outlook on video game music. Persona 5 was a wild revelation because never have I ever experienced something so intense and so overwhelming that it shifted my brain chemistry so much. And the funniest part is, it's not my first time listening to jazz. I grew up with jazz, but the style I was listening to was the softer and mellow you'd hear in lounges that I couldn't appreciate back then. So having those trumpets and drums go crazy during battles, palace runs, or boss fights was something else. And for another equal reason, Nier is exceptional in the way its soundtrack interweaves and becomes an incredibly important component of the storytelling, something that does not go unnoticed, and especially when many of its highs are tied to significant story moments. There's no other game doing like it, and these two games made me realize just how often music still tends to be overlooked in exception to popular games, which is why today I want to talk with y'all about some of my favorite soundtracks of all time, and hopefully contextualize them in a way that makes you appreciate this art in another light. A couple of rules before we start. These choices are not ranked, as I'll be going through them by year of release. I can only pick one entry per franchise, and they have to be albums I listen to outside of playing the games. So, with that out of the way, let me go crazy for the next couple of minutes. I am no fighting game god, straight up, and I'm the last person you should be asking about my opinions or tips for game mechanics. But dog, the Third Strike soundtrack is one of the greatest things I've ever heard. Fighting games are uniquely positioned in this lane where they experiment with different ideas, whenever and however they want, and more often than not, music is influenced by the aesthetics of the presentation. I've always gravitated towards Street Fighter because they have a cool approach to their over-the-top presentation and characters. You got people in stages from Japan, the US, China, Brazil, Kenya, and the soundtrack tends to be influenced by the characters' culture and personalities. For Third Strike in particular, there's this rich diversity of sounds for its time that it makes it feel international and stand out in a way I've always been compelled towards. This soundtrack is the work of Hideki Okugawa, a long-standing Capcom veteran who's been there since the 90s and to this day still composing. and apparently being the one to really spearhead the many jazzy compositions alongside the other variations like D&B and jungle. And you can feel this influence deeply seated in every track of this soundtrack. And I also can't forget to mention Canadian rapper Infinite, who built a strong personality within the game through his verses on some of the tracks, as well as being the in-game announcer, turning this soundtrack into a memorable masterpiece.
Represent your life. You start with anybody, so make your choice right. Select and make your first pick. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Choose and pick the best one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Select and make your first pick. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. Choose and pick the best one. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
It really is insane just how much texture and variety is packed into this soundtrack. And in many ways, it's also a rarity to see something as diverse as this nowadays, as we don't often get soundtracks exploring different genres and just jam them all together for a package that really has no right to be as good as it is. And the closest we have to this is the current Final Fantasy VII Remake trilogy, with Rebirth just being absolutely ridiculous. I fucking adore Ridge Racer. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time, and Type 4 in particular planted this deep passion for electronic music that I can't see myself existing in the future without having crossed paths with it. And what makes this soundtrack so fascinating to me is the period and the context it was developed in. The PS1 was one of those first consoles to introduce CDs as a cheaper method of storing games, compared to the manufacturing costs of cartridges Nintendo and Sega were used to. Inadvertently, CDs also offered increased storage capacities and higher quality audio to be stored as well. Around this time, the UK rave scene was having a revolution, where cross-pollination between other existing genres and cultures gave birth to new ones, as DJs melted on a pot tons of sampling in their work, as well as using combination of harsh electronic sounds, and drum and bass as a style wouldn't really take shape until this music track from 1969 that became the bedrock of the entire genre. Coming off of the track Amen Brothers, this somewhat simple sequence of 8 seconds from American band The Winstons led to one of the most oversampled sounds in music history, and is still used to this day, as new genres resurging today such as breakcore take that foundation while putting a new spin to it. So how does this tie to the PS1? It was around this time where music composers and sound designers started sampling sound effect libraries, such as the General Series 6000 and the Hollywood Edge Premiere Edition, more so than the synthesizers present on the consoles. And if you look up the first library, you'll find sounds used in many iconic games. It's incredible. In the context of Ridge Racer Type 4, a lot of these circumstances and external factors do play a role in how the game was designed as well. This is the final entry of the series on the PS1, meaning all the experience and expertise Namco has built up to that point was on full display. And the best way to compare it is seeing the first Ridge Racer side by side, just so you can understand how significant the jump is. Another factor is the game coming out in 1998 in Japan and 1999 globally, some years short of the new millennium beginning, where excitement was building up for a new chapter in humanity. So thematically, the game takes place during the fictional Real Racing Roots 99 Grand Prix, where you can join 4 different teams, each of varying difficulties with their own mini story arcs that all tie to the final race that occurs in the final minutes before the beginning of the year 2000. And the human drama in the writing brought not just a nuanced level of maturity to a genre you wouldn't expect, especially for the time it came out, but it also influenced the essence of the soundtrack itself. Sound director Hiroshi Okubo takes on the leading role and employs the help of Kota Takahashi, Asuka Sakai, Koji Nakagawa, and Tetsukazu Nakanishi, collectively known as Namco Sound Team, to deliver what I would argue to be one of the most important soundtracks in gaming. Ridge Racer Type 4 beautifully fuses many music styles such as UK garage, house, funk, acid jazz, and neo soul to not only drive a sense of nostalgia, glee, and relaxation, but also urgency and frenetic energy in many of its later tracks for an all-rounder package. And what better way to start and end your soundtrack with the beautiful vocals of American vocalist Kimara Lovelace, as she lends her voice to some of the most brain-melting blends seen up to this point. It's with no exaggeration when I say Ridge Racer Type 4 is one of my favorite soundtracks of all time. And it's not just the music itself, the historical context surrounding it does as well, from internal and external factors, and something like this serves as a strong argument of just how influential and significant globalization is to create great art.
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
Silent Hill 2 is many things to many people. A very haunting and personal exploration of James Sutherland's psyche and the inner horrors of his actions. The physical manifestations of said horrors, the surreal visual language of Silent Hills as a town, and the other world as a dimension of torment, and for me, just like many others, the mesmerizing soundtrack that envelops this tightly written tale. What makes the Silent Hill 2 soundtrack so significant is how you place it within the horror genre. For many horror games or films, there's this certain disconnect where the visuals are used to transmit a certain language and frame suspense, while the soundtrack is used as an appetizer, with the means of using it for specific moments instead of the whole, bar a few exceptions, which makes Silent Hill 2 soundtrack even more special. Akira Yamaoka is a self-taught musician, and I do believe being self-taught gives you this unique perspective in production when you're less focused on the theoretical part of the making and more on the sounds itself and how it can manipulate emotions, which is reflected across the whole soundtrack. And similar to Ridge Racer Type 4, Yamaoka makes heavy use of samples, which gives him a ton of leeway to break apart, experiment, and rebuild new compositions based on existing and original work, with all of this leading to a soundtrack heavily inspired by sounds of industrial, ambient, electronic, and experimental rock that perfectly portrays James' descent into hell so poignantly and vividly. I can't think of any other soundtrack that works synergistically with the storytelling apart from Nier. It's a beautiful work of art. I urge people to experience once, both the original and the remake, which, speaking of, while Yamaoka tries to expand and recapture the essence of Silent Hill 2 soundscape with a gargantuan 187 tracks in the remake, both main and original tracks, I feel the main 30 tracks of the original PS2 soundtrack really encompass the perfection of his work. Back in 2023, with the release of Armored Core 6, I took upon myself to play through every mainline Armored Core game, to prepare myself and discuss my experience in this channel, which you can check the playlist link in the description for all of them. And during my journey, it wasn't just the gameplay I took a liking to, but the soundtrack as well, as the series evolved from entry to entry. The PS1 Armored Core entries focus on more of very upbeat and energetic electronic music, the type that sounds very gamey and perfectly suited to the style of the game. For the PS2 entries, those harsher electronic sounds became more mellow, and more often than not borrowed from other styles of music to deliver something more considerate, especially Armored Core 3, which implemented orchestral for another layer of emotional depth with what the story was trying to do. But it's with the PS360 generation where the series goes through a soft reboot. For so many years, the game design of Armored Core has remained static, as each entry further improved and polished the existing core while adding new features when needed. But Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer saw a significant change. Starting as a struggling project, newly joined game designer Hidetaka Miyazaki took over for his first ever directorial role for a game, and as a result, we get a faster and aggressive gameplay style we hadn't seen before in the series. But there's also an attempt to do something more melodramatic, with the storytelling and the art direction as it played around with filters and lighting to really evoke desolation and despair. To accompany this shift, the collective group of composers at the helm of each entry saw it be shrunk to a single person in charge of this vast 27-track journey, Kota Hoshino. Hoshino, just like Yamaoka, is also a self-taught artist, and you can see how that influences his sound in many other games, such as some of early Armored Core tracks, and Evergrace. And what he brings to the table with Armored Core 4 is something I could have never expected: rock music. And when I mean rock, I mean just pure and unrelenting reliance on rock, little to no genre bending, a diverse set of instruments, and within it he shifts through so many stylistic compositions like energetic, dissonant, noisy. Psychedelic. And mechanical. This is one of the many few soundtracks that makes me value craftsmanship when it comes to imposing a strong identity that enhances the final presentation of a game. And it's also a showcase of the composer's ability to create a body of work that stands as tall as the game, or even higher, which gives me absolute respect for them. Atlus is the one company I don't keep much track of. Their games are massive in size and length, which makes them the studio I play their games the least because of the commitment. But when I do, I'm always enamored by their quality and earnestness, and Persona 4 is no different. The thing that really resonates with me in Persona games are the characters, the way they are written and how the game structure allows having the slice of life work flawlessly through the calendar system. A really genius idea that lets you experience a year full of events, interactions and exploration of many ideas, and the soundtrack does a beautiful job in accentuating the serenity of everyday rural suburbia and the ominous atmosphere of the TV world. Shoji Meguro, Atlus' former longtime composer, with the additional vocals from Japanese singer Chihoko Hirata, takes the same approach as the original Persona 3 soundtrack, by keeping it familiar with the stylings of very cheerful pop rock, electronic, jazz and classical composition. And he still manages to reinvent that language to deliver something that still feels fresh and unique, and when you hear and see it roll out in-game, it's like magic. Persona 5 is definitely the easier pick, given how Shoji really pushes acid jazz to its extreme, but personally, there's something cozy and comfortable about Persona 4's soundtrack that evokes strong emotions in me. It beautifully captures serenity and innocence in a way it would struggle in any other project, and Persona 4, specifically being a teen murder mystery story set in a rural setting, allows it to have such range. Mirror's Edge is a game I hold near and dear to my heart. It still feels so anti to the direction the industry was going at the time, prioritizing first-person shooters with bald-headed protagonists. Its hard direction is so pure, represented by simple colors and poignant shapes for a cohesive art style. The first-person platforming mechanics felt so innovative and exciting, showcasing a new perspective in a familiar style of play never seen before at this scale, especially coming from a first-person shooter team, and the music accompanying it, just pure perfection of ambient and electronic music, which accentuates every single moment perfectly. From the highs and lows to the mellows and exhilarating, it's one of a kind, and all of its creation is the handsome work of Swedish musician Magnus Birgersson, best known by his name Solarfields. If you listen to his music, Solar has this very particular style of music making, a very immersive and almost ethereal style that focuses on futurism while also capturing the human emotion that comes from those ideas, and he somehow finds the perfect balance of delivering varied, cohesive tracks and keeping the energy as consistent as possible, one of his best virtues, and the results speak for themselves. I would say this is on par with Ridge Racer Type 4 and Silent Hill 2 soundtracks for music that strongly resonate to me. No matter what circumstance I find myself in, pulling out the album and just listening to it for even a few minutes brightens my mood. And in many ways, I wish I could say the same for Mirror's Edge Catalyst, a very solid soundtrack that unfortunately features absurdly long tracks for the sake of the game and not the final listening experience, each track spanning 16 to 18 minutes and kills any incentive for me to listen to it frequently. Rockstar is mostly praised as a trend-setting benchmark powerhouse that consistently delivers some of the most culturally important games in the industry, and for good reason. It's a reputation they've been striving for over 3 decades now, and they deserve all the accolades for such incredible technical achievements. However, the Grand Theft Auto soundtracks rarely get the same amount of attention, and I don't mean the curated list of licensed songs for the radio stations, but the original sound works heard throughout their games. It's something where if you take the time to actively listen to them, you'd be surprised at how good they are, and GTA 5 is no different. First, we have longtime collaborator Woody Jackson, an incredible composer who's been with Rockstar since the first Red Dead Redemption game, and most likely to be involved in the Grand Theft Auto 6 soundtrack. Hip-hop producer Oh No is the second member, a California native who, similar to his brother Madlib, has a knack for heavy music sampling and consistently delivers some of the rawest beats I've ever listened to. And fun fact, he was behind the iconic Sleeping Dogs 4 main menu themes. The third member is The Alchemist, another California native and longtime producer for mainstream and underground rappers that it's hard to keep track of. Some of my favorite projects by him are Alfredo with Freddie Gibbs, This Thing of Ours and Yacht Rock 2, both his personal projects, but these days he's mostly known for producing Meet the Grams by Kendrick Lamar, the most diabolical track of the whole beef. And finally, but not least, Tangerine Dream, that in all honesty, I never heard of before GTA 5, but once I got to hear more of their work, I understood why they were selected and their importance in this project. With such an ambitious team, you get one of the best soundtracks in the series, as well as a defining representation of music native to California. Picture it like this. This group of artists pull from different styles and genres like hip-hop, electronic and rock to portray the best the West Coast has to offer sonically, and thanks to that initiative, it retroactively fits perfectly within the tone of the game's world and our main protagonists, which is a fact I've always been fascinated by, which in my eyes make it a legendary soundtrack. Both it and GTA 5 as a game have long withstood an entire decade as a cultural tour de force, and much of its success is not only credit to the incredible vision of the game's direction, but also how nostalgic the music is becoming as we age. Powerful stuff. It's with no exaggeration when I say Valhalla saved me, and I played it in a period where I needed it the most. I don't get personal on this channel often, but I'm making an exception this time. At the end of 2019, I was 17 and went abroad to Portugal to pursue my game design studies. I was living by myself, something new to me, and I was enjoying this newly found freedom and figuring out how to adult my life in the first months. Fast forward a year later, December 2020, I went back to my parents for Christmas, and this was at the height of COVID. I'm an anxious person ever since as a kid, and I've found ways to better manage it, but rarely does it spiral out, and this was one of those moments. This was my first time traveling by myself, and having to handle all of the necessary documentation for travel made it a very stressful week. But once I got there, those 2 weeks were some of the most blissful moments I had since I left. January 2021 came and I never knew the concept of homesickness, and it's an understatement to say just how shit of a feeling this is. Once I returned to resume my studies, I got extremely homesick, and the lockdown didn't help whatsoever. My anxiety was at an all-time high, making my second year of uni difficult to focus on. I wasn't having fun making games whatsoever. I was struggling to find peace and quality sleep. I just felt like shit 24/7. Once I finished my second year, I was in the process of coming to the UK and finish my third year, so I had to leave my accommodation and crash at a relative's place for a month by myself, while I waited for my third year to start and get all the documentation up to date before travel. This waiting period was a blessing in disguise, as this waiting game gave me the time to properly relax and reassess myself and my goals. During this time, I finally went through the No More Heroes series. I was rewatching old movies and anime I had stored in my hard drive, and between these I was playing Yakuza Like a Dragon, the most hope-core game I never expected to be, and Valhalla thanks to a friend who finally had her agenda work her way. What I didn't expect was an experience that would resonate with me to this day. The core premise of Valhalla is you play as a bartender, serving drinks and saving lives while conversing with customers. It's a visual novel at heart, but the drink mixing system takes it to a whole new level, serving as a hidden dialogue choice system that dictates the outcome of conversations depending on how you prepare the drink. This concept only works as well as it does due to the simplistic nature of the storytelling. It's about normal people going on about their day in the cyberpunk setting, and most of your days go by simply walking up and do some housekeeping, serving drinks, talking to customers, rinse and repeat, which sounds like I'm underselling it, but it's all in service of the characters, so believable and emotionally flawed in a way that sells the drama and the arcs they all go through from day to day. Accompanying this game is a soundtrack that I can only describe as perfect. Composed by Michael Kelly, also known as Garowad, this soundtrack takes on the cyberpunk influences by being heavily based on synths and electronic compositions, and by taking advantage of two important styles, synthwave and electro house. He really taps into a specific groove that's in tune with the atmosphere and the tone of the story. It also taps into a portion of my heart that deeply resonates with atmospheric, bittersweet, melodic, soothing, melancholic, and ethereal sounds that I don't think any other soundtrack has got me close to emotionally ache. It's genuinely beautiful, and it became a huge obsession for most of the next year listening to it non-stop. RGG has quickly shot up as one of my favorite studios this past few years, ever since I played Yakuza Kiwami in 2018, and it wasn't until the first Judgment game came out that this admiration became an obsession, leading me to play every single mainline Yakuza game until I caught up with Yakuza Like a Dragon in 2021, and from there being caught up with each new entry as they release. Judgment felt so fresh at the time for me because of how it approached open world exploration. Many open world games tend to fall in a trap where scale in raw square kilometers is heavily emphasized, claiming to support hours and hours of play for the sake of padding, and ultimately affecting the final experience, aside from a few exceptions like Dragon's Dogma 2, The Current Legend of Zelda Duology, and Red Dead Redemption 2, which figured out organic and mostly systemic exploration where anything can happen from A to B. But this doesn't apply to most games. In the case of the Yakuza games, they focus less on skill and focus more on density. Kamurocho and other subsequent towns may be small compared to other games, but they pack hours and hours of content by selectively curating them in a way that never feels dragged out or of poor quality, and this comes from years of iterating and perfecting this style of design. Another reason why I got into Judgment was its modern neo-noir focus on an ex-lawyer, now private investigator, solving a murder case that spirals into a larger conspiracy the deeper he delves into it, and it's flawless. This soundtrack is the work of a massive composition group of longtime RGG composers and collaborators, such as Hidenori Choji, Yuri Fukuda, Sayori Yoshida, Ryo Hashikawa, Shihiro Aoki the GOAT, Hid Lunch, Tomoyuki Tanaka, Jin Senbonmatsu, Hideyuki Ono, 83 Key, Yuki Kobayashi, and Kiyo for something that suits the cinematic needs of the project, as well as encompassing the breadth that is the quintessential Yakuza experience through the side content, and having such a varied collective of composers gives room for so many styles and influences to seep through the soundtrack, and it has always been in this company's history. It mostly shifts through jazz, electronic, and rock compositions, and seamlessly interject and interweaves across these three effortlessly. In a way, Umurangi is significant to me in the same way Valhalla is, not life-changing but one I cherish. The beauty in this game again lies in its simplicity, where as a courier, you're tasked with photographing specific scenarios in varying environments, and each of them make use of environmental storytelling to deliver a very poignant narrative rooted in real-world politics and the ethics of photography itself. This was also when I shifted my channel into being more game design centric, and I still remember it being much smaller than it is now, in the double digits. I bought a proper microphone I still use to this day. I tried my luck requesting the dev for a code for the upcoming Switch version to review the game, and never in a million years did I ever thought it would pan out. It took me a whole month to beat the game, juggling it with studies at the time and writing the review, and the day I recorded I had a really sore throat, but still decided to carry on out of excitement. What amazed me the most in all of this was the dev's response and not caring about my numbers and provide me with a code, and even supporting my review on Twitter definitely gave me a boost in confidence that I was doing great at reviewing games, and I'm really fortunate for that moment. Accompanying this package is the soundtrack composed by Thor High Heels, a content creator I've admired for so long in how unique and original she is in her aesthetics and how that melts into everything she does. There's something very particular in her style of composition that it's challenging to properly put into words, but the soundscape feels so vivid and textured. It's almost like you're experiencing a psychedelic episode, and it's an incredible feeling. It's funny looking back at myself 8 years ago, before I was deeply obsessed with music the way I am now. In these last few years, it has become something close to therapy, as my tastes are vaster than ever and I'm more willing to lend an ear to any sound, whether traditional or experimental. I also think games became a conduit for expanding my music tastes even before I was paying attention. Making this video made me realize just how varied my selections are and how they speak to my preferences and approach to music in general. The main genres I gravitate towards are hip-hop and electronic. They're my main pillars. But I also have phases, like right now, I'm listening to a lot of pop and dance music from artists like Charlie XCX, Janet Jackson, Steve Lacy, Pink Panthers, and Kaytranada because of summer. Last year, I dug deep into breakcore, listening to Sewer Slut, and don't worry, I know the history behind that artist. Machine Girl, Blacksmith, and up-and-coming ones like Trashy and Lomaji. Extra shout out to Trashy, he's been carrying most of my listens since last year and I really like his work. In the grand scheme, these more international sounds, let's say, have been shaped by video games one way or another, and I love having that synergy. Now for a bit of housekeeping before we wrap up. All the songs featured today will be listed in the end, with links to where you can listen to them in the description. I wish I could make a full Spotify playlist, but 3 of the 10 albums are on streaming services, specifically the soundtracks for Ridge Racer Type 4 and Armored Core 4. For Judgment, both the first game and its sequel got mixed into a compilation album, and is missing some of the songs I've shown. Also, while I use some of my own recorded gameplay, this video wouldn't be possible without the footage from other YouTube channels, all of which will be linked in the description. If you enjoyed the video, leave a like, subscribe, share with your friends and activate the bell so you can get notifications of my latest video, and thank you for watching.